So I'm going to talk to you today about incompetence. And again, I think all this chaos just creates political instability, which creates financial instability. But it's one of the reasons I think, there's certain things that Trump administration can do easily, right? The powers are there, the laws are clear. If you're an illegal immigrant, they can deport you. Of course, they've gone past that. But one of the issues I've noticed is just incompetence. And there, it's things that they can't get anything done. And I'm going to give you an example. Trump seems all excited about abolishing the IRS, right? And this goes back to Rick Scott senator from Florida had referenced this before, and then President Joe Biden had brought it up at the State of the Union, and it kind of was such a backlash on that he kind of backtracked. Governor, he was a governor, but Senator Rick Scott, and now you see Trump saying this, and the idea is because before we did this the country was rich and everything else. And he kind of makes it seem like he's saying we've never been that way before, which doesn't make any sense. But he wants to take us back to pre IRS, 1913. And I've had people on my social media feed say, oh, the IRS, before that happened and we had tariffs. Part of the reason of the Great Depression is because of a tariff war. And you see the effects of the tariff war now, right? It doesn't work. And so to think that something in 1913 is going to work financially in today's global economy, it's absurd. You don't have to be an economist to understand that it just doesn't work that way. So, if you think 1913 was so great, next time you go to your dentist or your doctor, tell them to start using 1913 procedures. Let's see how that goes. I'm sure you're not going to like it. But it just goes to if they abolish the IRS, this is where I get confused and I say, I just think they're incompetent. They don't know what they're talking about. So let's suppose the IRS is gone, right? The other day they're also saying, and I forgot who in the administration was saying, they're going to look at your spouse's tax return to determine how much you should be paying back in student loans. So basically, it's even if you're married but filing separately. So now, based on your wife's income, will determine how much a student loan borrower pays. Now, backtrack there for a second. You're trying to get rid of the IRS, but you're going to look at her income through what? Through tax returns that don't exist. And by the way, why would a spouse's income be relevant as to what a person owes? Imagine if a credit card company said, we're going to determine your monthly payment based on how much your spouse earns. Why? It should just be a flat, this is what we charge based on how much you owe and the interest, and this is what the payments come out to. So here's an example. What if I married JLo? We're going to include her income to figure out what I should pay back in student loans. Let's pretend I'm a dentist, and I say dentist because they're the ones who have the highest student loan ratio. I think something like 323,000, if I remember, more or less. I saw those figures more than a year ago. I remember a student looked it up for me in class. So they say, okay, we're looking at her income, and I'll make it up. I have no idea what it is. She makes 20 million a year. Based on that, you should pay 10,000 a month. I don't even make 10,000 a month. So how'd you come up with that number? Well, that's what she earns. And so we're gonna use her income to figure out how much you would pay. Do they do that for car loans? Do they do that for mortgages? Of course not. They don't. One thing has nothing to do with the other. Here's a step further. JLo would make me sign a prenuptial agreement. So how does the prenup work on that? Basically, the prenup is what? We don't pay attention to it. There's a prenup that says her income is her income, my income is my income. But then when it comes to student loans, they're going to look at her income. Again, how are they going to look at her income? But she's not a W 2 employee, right? So how are they going to even get access to that information? You just abolished the IRS. You can't have both. Which one is it? Are we keeping the IRS and then we'll go based on that? Or we're not keeping the IRS? Because I don't understand how you're going to figure this out without the IRS and without tax returns. Now, let's just go a step further. Suppose all this is true. How do I get a mortgage? How do I get a car loan? I've been self-employed, basically since I graduated law school in '99, right? So I've always known how difficult it is to get a loan because banks, you would think they understand how tax returns work, are always confused about my income. And so the last time I dealt with this was about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. My rent was 1550. Between deposits, at the end of the day, my mortgage was going to be a little over $400. Think of that number. We're talking $1,000 difference. The bank was like, we don't really know what you earn. Does it really matter at this point? I just gave you a huge deposit and the mortgage is 400. I've been paying 1550 for years, something like 4 or 5 years. And during COVID, where it didn't, not one payment was late, and the 1550 was paid every single month, and that was easily documented. But the bank was, oh, but you're self-employed. So they came back and says, if you pay off your car, then we'll do the deal. I go, I'm not spending another 30K on the car. Why would I do that? That's a tax break for me. So I said, guys, this isn't that difficult. Besides the 1550 versus the 400, which is beyond absurd. I go, just have someone look at it. They'll just tell you that whatever I declare as a business expense, slide it over to the personal side and we'll call that income. And there's the magical number if you really want to make it that simple. So if banks have that issue where they don't even understand something as simple as that, how are we now going to apply for a loan if there's no tax returns? Might be easier for a W 2 employee, right? But what about the 1099 guy like me? How do you get a car loan? What is the bank going to ask for now in order to give you that loan? It just makes no sense. And I think this is obviously the left hand doesn't know what the right is doing. And we see this consistently in this administration. And this is part of the chaos that creates political instability, which results in financial instability. President wants to get rid of the IRS. And you have and by the way, they just I think something wow, I want to say no, that's 40% of the medical, the CDC that they're getting rid of. I think the IRS is something like 20 something percent of the employees they're trying to get rid of. So if we're trying to get rid of them or reduce them, or let's just say abolish, because that's what seems to be the word, then how are you going to know what my wife earns and then somehow calculate that towards me and say, this is how much I should pay in student loans? And again, call your credit card company and say, are you basing my monthly payment on what my spouse earns? You know what they're going to say. But then they want to do that for student loans, for taxes that don't exist. And how we're going to get a loan to buy a car or buy a home, I don't know, because the IRS and tax returns don't exist. I don't know. And you know who else doesn't know? They don't know. Welcome to chaos. That's how the economy falls apart. It's really that simple.